Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
It's almost here.
Holiday.
Oh, we're going to sing?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Feeling that karaoke from last week still, huh?
Yes,
Good one.
here we are. It is nearing the Christmas time. Everyone's excited. Everyone is excited and stressed out all at the same time. It's
Christmas Eve services at CCC.
That's happening
starting today.
That's an advertisement. This episode brought to you by
Or a week from
Christmas
today.
with
Sorry.
Christ
A week from
Community
today.
Church.
Yeah.
Visit christmaswithccc.com to learn more. Yes, so that is happening next week, which also means that it's that time of year where we take a little break around the holidays and the new year to spend time with family and just kind of reset.
Get ourselves right, you know.
Yeah,
Whatever
so
that means.
whatever that
yourself.
means. So this will be your last episode until kind of early to mid-January. We'll be back with some more episodes.
See you next year. Remember that?
Oh,
Like
that's a
in
good
school,
joke. Yeah,
where
see you
always
next year,
make that.
everybody. Well,
Yeah.
I'll save that for the end of this
Okay.
episode. I'll
Sorry.
say that when I sign off. But another, if you're really missing us, maybe you could catch up on some of the episodes you've missed in the past, because we're like getting close to 160 here.
Yeah.
It's a lot of podcasts. You might have missed some along the way, so dip back into the catalog. But we will be back, like I said, in early to mid-January. So look forward to that. Now that we got the housekeeping out of the way, do we have any voicemails?
We have a voicemail.
All right.
Here it is.
I'm excited.
Hey, uncomfortable podcast crew, long-time caller, long-time listener, first-time caller. Sorry about that. You guys doing a great job. Especially going to give a shout-out to Austin. I think he's kind of the unsung hero. I do have a question, maybe a suggestion question on, I know he's got a new kid coming. I wonder if he knows the gender. And I do have some suggestions on names. Think if it's a male, I'm thinking Gideon, probably a good name. Female, I'm thinking either Lizzie or Sadie. Anyway, love what you guys do. Can't wait for the next episode to drop. Thanks.
Wow, Austin's been talked
I
about
feel
a
like
lot,
Austin is getting
and now we've
some
got
notoriety.
voicemails. Yeah,
If we had if we were going to give year-end awards, for sure he is the unsung hero of the podcast.
That is
I
true.
mean, I hope he's okay with the fact that there was like some personal information that was just shared there. But
I mean, maybe
alive.
not everybody knows that
yeah.
he's having
Well,
another child.
Congrats to Austin over there, who's just kind of
I assume most
uncomfortably
people
He's not
laughing.
in
making
church
eye
can
contact with us
pick
right
him
now.
out in the crowd anyway to go say congrats to him. So he'll get a
Yeah,
lot of that.
go to
I love that he
CCC.
got a shout out though, because he really deserves it.
Yeah, he does.
For all he does.
Go to cccomaha.org/staff.
I've
if
been
you
trying
wanna
to get
see
him to do an
Austin.
episode on the podcast for probably 2 years.
Yeah.
Since I joined.
I think my favorite part of 2023 is we become the gender guessing
That's
podcast
true.
and name guessing, which we should update people.
Okay, yeah, we should. Go ahead.
Rachel, our former co-host, she did
Called in.
announce.
Yeah,
she called in and asked us to guess the gender and name, give name suggestions. I lost. I said it was going to be a little girl, and I think both of you guys said a boy. And they did announce the gender. Baby hasn't been born, so no name that I know of, but it is
Okay.
a boy. So,
Well, still holding out for Eric. So let's see.
so I'm going to stay in with the girl on this vote for Austin.
So
So
you're voting
moving on
for a
to
girl
Austin.
for Austin.
Austin's
Okay.
going to have a little girl.
Austin, did you give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down for the male name he gave you? Can we get a thumbs up? Thumbs down.
Oh, that's a
What about
that
the
was a fast
the
no.
Caller.
female? A thumbs down for both. So sorry, caller.
It is
Neither
not
of
going
those
to be
names.
Gideon, Lizzie, or Sadie.
None of those.
That's like 3 interesting names to choose.
Yeah, they feel very Amish.
No, I feel like they feel very like
Amish.
intentional somehow.
All right. Well, that happened.
So I'm gonna vote boy. I think we're gonna make the trifecta.
Oh,
Three.
okay.
He
Are
does
we
have
doing
he
this?
does have
boys.
2 sons right now, just for those wondering.
In case that
I have to
matters.
guess boy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I'm gonna flip on this one. I'm gonna side with Alex. So we're gonna see what happens here.
Austin, do you know?
No.
He's
Next
saying
week,
no.
I think. Next week. So we'll have to wait.
to update everybody
Everybody.
in January.
If anybody else wants us to guess their gender,
Yeah.
of
Right
their
now,
child.
Eric
Of their
and I are-
child. Not
True.
their current
The gender of your baby. Eric and
name
I, we're
suggestions.
currently 100%,
Oh, yeah. So, I mean,
but now we're about to divide it.
okay. This
see.
podcast
Okay,
is
well-
really changing.
And the
what-
name,
what
I'm going to
it's
say the
about.
name.
Go ahead.
I think he listens to Jess so much on here that he's going to name baby girl Jessica.
There we go. All right.
An ode to you.
Yeah. Maybe her middle name could be Holly, like Holly.
Ooh,
Or
cute.
So it
Holly.
would be
Holly
like-
could be like
Ooh,
a.
that's a cute
Jessica
name
I could see
too.
that like a cute little girl name.
Anyways.
I think you should name the baby Eric Phillip.
Oh,
Wait, if it's a boy?
that's like an Easter egg for people out there.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good name. Yeah. Our Erica Felina. All right. Well, that does it for our top of the show, but we've got headlines coming up next, so you don't want to miss that. There's always exciting news happening, so stay tuned for that. All right, our first headline, and only headline today, comes from my favorite source of news, AmericanSongwriter.com.
Quality.
Read that.
Quality
Read that
reporting.
quite frequently.
What's that monthly subscription?
No fake news here on AmericanSongwriter.com. Alex, you put this headline in. It says Blake Shelton nearly speechless after Bodie's Gratitude cover on The Voice finale. So Bodie, I take it, is a contestant on the singing competition The Voice, which we talked about a little bit last week.
I haven't been following The Voice, to be honest with you,
Okay.
at all. And then, our caller last week asked us what we would sing if we were on The Voice. And then it's kind of one of those things where until something's mentioned, it never is anywhere. And then all of a sudden someone mentions it and it just pops up everywhere. So I was, it's because, Big Brother's always listening or whatever. But I was just on Instagram the other night and this popped up in my playlist. I think it was actually Danya, who used to be a resident here. I think it was on her story, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And so I watched, and there it was, the song "Gratitude," which we've sang here at Christ Community. It's a probably a newer, kind of contemporary, if we call it, Christian by Brandon Lake. And so, it was just a cool moment to watch, and we happened to have sung it that day in like our staff development too, which was kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So I think there's a thing about that.
It's always interesting when this stuff. I was trying to process this because it's kind of like when Kanye released a gospel album in 2019, or any time there's this groundswell of there's someone in mainstream media or mainstream celebrity likes what I like, we get really excited, like. I don't know. It's just interesting to me because I have no idea Bodie's background. I don't know if he's a believer. I don't know who on the cast of The Voice are believers between, I think, who is the John Legend and Gwen Stefani, Blake Shelton. I don't know. There's a third or fourth too. But it's just interesting because this stuff happens and it's that kind of tribalistic thing, which I think will lead into what we're talking about.
Like we all kind of
later.
get behind it.
Yeah, people get really excited about it, and I just wonder is I mean, I'm not saying it. I don't think it's
A bad
good
thing.
or bad.
Yeah.
It's just it's a thing that happens. And
Yeah,
Do you feel like-
moved Gwen Stefani to tears and left Shelton very speechless. And I thought one of the things that was cool about it was, what's her name? Gwen Stefani said, "You have a superpower behind you. It's the truth, and it comes from the pure faith that you have."
oh wow,
So I mean that. I haven't not kept up on this, show, so I don't know if he is, someone that's claiming to be a believer or anything like that. But I watched it, and it was definitely one of those. Okay,
yeah, that
that
was
was
a powerful
powerful.
performance for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
and it's just cool no matter what to sing. I mean, to hear the lyrics on,
Right.
God getting glory in some way, at least by
A show
the
that
lyrics.
millions of people are watching.
Yeah.
For sure, it's a cool thing.
I think that's exciting. Well, Jess, were you about to say something? To
Yeah,
them?
sorry.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, do you feel like when things like this happen that I'm not saying like that Christians feel like it's their right or their or like their duty to make a big deal about it just because it doesn't happen super often in mainstream media. So it's almost like it feels like we need to like give it, even like where we're giving it attention. Like right now, it kind of seems like, hey, it comes along, and when it does, we need to highlight it because that's part of not necessarily our faith, but like part of being Christians is like supporting.
Well, and I think part of it, the tribal mentality is just we're always looking for a way to say I'm not weird or I'm not an outlier. And so when something like this comes around, I think wherever you are in your Christian faith, you have probably experienced some sort of alienation by mainstream, secular friends or secular circles. And so you see something like this and you go, oh, okay, yeah, this feels good that they're at least acknowledging this and it doesn't feel like it's in a negative way. Like so many times Christianity is put in a negative context. So when it's something positive, I think we want to celebrate that. But I also
want to get behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, legitimizes in some ways it feels like
That's
what
a good
we're
word
doing.
for it.
But I think that happens. I was trying to think of an analogy, but I think that happens whether it's political or any other, I don't know, maybe Alex finds out one of his, Michael Jordan loves spaghetti and Alex loves spaghetti and like he's just like so excited about that. I don't know. It's just that's a silly example, but I don't think it's just uniquely a Christian phenomenon when this happens. I think it's more of a tribal thing of like I identify. I wear Hoka shoes or whatever brand, and someone else wears.
And
it
people
too.
recognize, that about you, and so sometimes they'll send it. So, for example, during Dancing with the Stars this last season, I also didn't watch that, but I couldn't tell you how many people asked my wife and I, "Are we watching Dancing with the Stars?" Because one of the contestants was deaf.
Oh yeah,
and so. They know there's that link to us. And so sometimes I think when there's that link to somebody and you care about, you're like, hey, it's cool that this is being highlighted in the forefront and celebrated in some ways. And so every person that texts us about that, it was that motive of like, hey, this is cool, you should watch. And it was like more of a hurrah and like proud, and
connection.
That connection moment, which is a cool thing.
Well, and I think we want to see ourselves in the stories that are told around us and the cultural moments. And there's always this pushback when characters in stories, like whether it's comic book movies or whatever, Netflix series or something, and they change the race of a character or the gender of a character to represents someone else. You see people get all upset about that. But I think this is a good reminder, especially for believers in Christ, that, hey, that's why people want to see themselves represented in other media forms, because this is something that whether it's in the deaf culture or Christian culture or in other ethnic backgrounds, whatever that is, it's something where they can identify and see themselves and go, hey, I'm not an outlier. Like, I can do great things too, or I can be a part of a bigger story than myself. And so I think that's just, I don't know.
Yeah, good thoughts.
It's
really
a fun reminder sometimes.
And maybe, I oftentimes, there's a lot of very popular songs sung, that are covers essentially on there. And so maybe if nothing else, it points people to Brandon Lake, who is a, worship artist, and makes people say, oh, that was a well-written song. And, I'm guessing the day after, he got a lot more streams, even on his original music and worship stuff. So.
Yeah, if someone had a stereotypical idea of what worship sounds like, that might change that view for sure. Okay. All right. That's our headline today. But up next, as we alluded to, we're going to be discussing brand loyalty. The brands you wear, the brands that make, that you identify with them, maybe even build your identity, or that you've built your identity around. So stay tuned for that. Brand loyalty. That's what we're talking about today. It might seem a little bit obscure, but I think we're all probably somewhat susceptible to certain types of brands. We stick to a certain brand, whether that's peanut butter, toilet paper, whatever. But Alex, why don't you start this off a little bit? Explain to us and our listeners kind of the origin of the term brand, why it's important.
Well, so I'll back up to like what even got me thinking about this is my wife a few weeks ago.
My wife. Sorry, I can't.
So
Every time someone says my wife,
she told me what present to get her, and they were a certain pair of leggings that she had never had, and they were expensive leggings.
Oh, you're not going
And
to say the brand?
They're Lululemon.
Oh, okay.
And so she's like, all my friends tell me these are the best. So you've got someone, friends saying these are the best. And so she's like, buy them for me. And then like the other night, she's like, never buy those for me again. Like I can get a cheaper brand that hold up a lot better. And she's like, it's just everybody just needs that check on their butt. Apparently that's where the logo is, like lower back, And so it got me thinking about how much in my life do I identify with a brand and chase after that, and how much does really my identity have to do with it? Like, for example, Christmas is coming up, and so it's not like I'm like, hey babe, I just need a new pair of shoes. Like, it's very specific. Like, if you just get me a pair of shoes and I don't like them or they're not a certain brand, then I'm probably gonna be like, what
where's the receipt?
What'd you get me? And like, so maybe
It's
I'm
like, why'd you get me
susceptible to
Nike? I
that.
only wear Toms.
Yeah, I only wear Toms, or I only wear So, and branding, we're good Midwesterners. Obviously, I think you can associate it with like this idea of ownership. They brand cattle and all that kind of stuff, and it goes way back. This idea of people would put their brand, like kings would put their seal on something to represent who we are and the legitimacy of something, and they would also brand as they would ship boxes or different kinds of...
Or even mailing letters.
Yeah, all of that kind of stuff is a part of it. And even the Egyptians, you could go look at like hieroglyphics found in certain places, and you'll see like a cattle with like a certain, maybe it wasn't burnt into them, but like a paint or whatever that was representing a somewhat of an ownership and an expectation and maybe a dominance in some kind of way. And so really there is this kind of ownership that's recognizable by, branding. And then marketing really took over in the late 1800s as far as how to get people to identify even more so with brands as far as consumer product. I don't think brands for consumers were a huge deal, way before that. But it really started to take over, obviously, in the marketing world. And things
so you're
like
saying
that.
when I throw on my Nike cap, I'm saying to the world that Nike owns me because I'm branded by Nike?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay.
But it started with like the idea of ownership.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about, though.
It is.
Yeah.
When you put it in that term. Yeah.
And so like when Quaker Oats was one of the first, brands as I was doing some research that really started to reach into this, using the source of branding as like it represents something. And so Quaker Oats, I was trying to find where it was in my article, was one of the first people to use their brand in a packaged good and say, this represents something. It represents something that's reliable. It's consistent. Every time you get this product, because maybe oatmeal batches weren't always reliable and consistent.
Yeah.
So they were saying, you're going to always get this reliable, consistent product, the same weight, the same everything at a certain time. And so it was just for people to have confidence, I think. So like when you have Nike on, you're like, okay, I'm confident that this is made well and all that kind of stuff. And then, and I think for a long time when we use phrases like they just don't make stuff like they used to, a lot of times it's like, well, this brand is digressing, or maybe they're getting cheaper in their products and so on and so forth. But overall for me, it was like, okay, man, how much do I like purchase based on brand?
Yeah.
How much like thinking back to my childhood, and we can talk about that more later, was driven my identity around what I wore, what check was on my shoes, or what logo brand was on, almost mindlessly, not even knowing is this better or not.
Well, what's interesting is that there's so many brands that have become synonymous with the product that they have, but their name has taken that on. And I think
Right, like if we set a product, you could list the brands that
well,
represent
not even that,
product.
just that they like Kleenex. I would say hand me a Kleenex, not a tissue.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And that the brand is Kleenex, not the actual.
Or Q-tip. Like I need to, like I don't ever say I need a cotton swab for my ear.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if I tell my kids, hey, you need to grab a Q-tip. Like that's literally a brand, or Band-Aid, chapstick,
Tupperware, styrofoam.
Velcro.
Wow, you guys are just coming up with these off the top
I
of
did
your
a
head.
little
I'm very
crock pot.
impressed.
Koozie.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a little list here. Sorry.
So those are brands that basically owned. They were the first ones to introduce that product, and they've owned that
like
space.
a Post-it
and-
note.
Yeah,
I had to add one.
a Post-it note.
There you go. Yeah.
And then there's obviously this idea of generic or you've got name brand or off brand, I think, comes from this. And so,
So what are some of the brands that we personally feel loyal to? Is there, I mean, for me, right off the gate, there's a handful I can think of. When it comes to peanut butter, I'm a Jif guy. I grew up on Skippy, but I moved to Jif when I got married. I won't go back. I'm just committed to Jif. But that's just because, like, again, it's a consistency thing. Like, it's a flavor. It's something you become
obviously
accustomed to.
Sometimes people, it's loyalty becomes like because of a certain allergy or whatever.
Right.
Like you have a loyalty. But like I would say for me, like Dr. Pepper is one of those brands that I'm loyal to.
You're not going to go for
I'm not a Mr. Pibb guy or the Dr.
Thunder,
Dr. Underwear, Dr. Hee Haw,
Dr. Underwear?
Dr. I mean, I don't know. There's like a million names. That's all me.
That's
There's
not a
probably-
soda.
there's
That's a different thing.
Nobody Googled that.
Yeah.
Good point. I was just, don't Google it, please.
I'm going to stop on my head. But yeah, I do think, I'm trying to think, like Apple products, I tend to lean towards an iPhone or Mac computers. But I don't know. But then there's certain things, like I would build a PC for gaming purposes, but I wouldn't build a PC just for regular, like using it for Photoshop and different design things like that, because there's a consistency there. There's a trusted in it. And I think sometimes where it gets weird is when people are like, oh, you're just part of the cult of Mac, or you're part of, and maybe, but also it's just like, I know I can trust it to do the thing I want it to do.
Yeah.
And so it's about, I don't know, just getting the job done.
Well, even to the point where I was using the shoes as an example, like there's part of me that feels like a pride and part of me that feels like an ooh, that Jess was like Tom's, that you're just like, or one of you said that.
I said Tom's.
That like you're like, oh, I
That
know
you're
you,
and
I can associate you with liking a certain brand because you're so consistent, with that. And so there's a part of me that's
You were
like,
a little
oh,
offended.
yeah. No, like there's a part of me that's like, ew, is that kind of gross? That like I've become synonymous with that, but then there's another part of me like, well, yeah, like I kind of purposely do that.
Yeah.
Well, right, because
so
there
it's-
is some pride involved, depending what it is. I mean, like even as we're talking, I didn't even, and this is another point, like we don't even realize we're doing it, because I feel like, this is going to sound dumb, but I feel like I've been on this journey to find a toilet paper brand that I like.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've tried, like store brand, Cottonelle, like I've tried them all, and I have narrowed it down
Yeah.
to
So
what
you have found what you're looking
I
for.
feel like
I like
this is just coming off as like a super sponsored episode where people
No,
are going to think
right.
no
We're gonna get all kinds of.
offers. Yeah. Anyways, what is it?
Well, I've landed on Charmin Ultra Soft,
Right.
but it is
That's the best one.
It
is
is
the best one.
Yeah, but it's like a
Austin
journey of.
earlier tried to argue with me about some
And
great
I
value or
I
something.
I
but
disagree.
Charmin
And I also
Ultra
feel
Soft
very
is
opinionated about
definitely where it's
Viva
at.
paper towels. Like I don't, but now we're saying about it, and it feels weird.
Like
and
I'm
very,
Kirkland toilet paper all the way. I do agree that like Charmin Ultra Soft feels
I love
better
how
on my
you're
hiney,
arguing
but I'm
about
like,
toilet paper.
how much?
Yeah,
It is like, but how much
But this is what
more
happens.
do I want to pay for that, and how much better is it? And I think we
How
make
much
those-
better is it?
I will say the Sam's Club paper towels are just as good as Bounty.
And what is that? Let's
But
just
I think
Members-
that this
members
is what
mark or
happens,
something
though.
like
It's
that,
like
yeah.
we
Yeah.
are loyal to a brand to the point where it's like you almost feel defensive of it.
Yeah.
But then also I think there's like maybe not necessarily in toilet paper, but if you're wearing a certain brand of clothing or shoe where it represents something that you like, there's definitely pride in having that.
There's so many other factors that play into it too. I think my first car when I was in high school was a 1986 Honda Prelude, and I just fell in love with Hondas, the way their engines sounded, the way they drove, everything about Honda. I just loved it, and so I developed early on a brand loyalty to
and a
Honda.
trust, like a trust to. And if that car probably would have gone bad really quickly, then you probably would have been like,
yeah, Hondas are bad, or whatever.
So
Which,
our
I mean,
experiences
yeah.
play a huge role
Absolutely.
in it. And I think it depends on, like I did a little poll on our Instagram, and I think it depends, like there's not a lot of people that are like, I'm always the name brand person versus generic. And so sometimes it just matters on what, type of product it is. So I just put out there, and I'll just give the results because I thought it was interesting, like toiletries. So I put that out there, and 43% of people said brand name is what they go for. 57% said generic. Groceries, and again, these are no nuance
It's
to
like
these
top
categories.
shelf, bottom shelf cereals.
Yeah,
sort of
so
thing.
54% people said generic, and 46% of people said brand name. Clothing, 58% of people said brand name on that one, 42% generic. Accessories, the opposite. 58% of people said they would go generic accessories, and that could mean so many things. So people, this is up for interpretation, and 42% said brand name. And then I said electronics, and this one was 93% said brand name, 7% generic.
Right. But at this point, there are corporations that own those market spaces that what generic are you getting when it comes to electron? Like you either get an iPhone or an Android. What's the generic?
Yeah, I think like headphones, and so there's definitely consumer products where it's like, okay, I'll go with like a charger. That's not Apple, but maybe it's Anchor. Was that generic or not? So anyway, I just think that's interesting because I think depending on the product category, we have a willingness to separate.
Well, and some people even responded to those with both on a lot of them because I think it's true. Like when I'm shopping for groceries, I will definitely get the Jif peanut butter, but I might get I'll easily get the off-brand sugar or flour or baking ingredients. Right. But then when it comes to cereal, I'm not getting the marshmallow mateys. I'm gonna get the Lucky Charms. So I don't know. I think it depends on what the product
even
is.
inside of that. But it was just an interesting way to kind of see how. And I had that hunch that it just kind of depends on the consumer product and the brand that we would chase for sure.
So how have we around this table seen brands create classism? Whether it's you're growing up in school and maybe you couldn't afford the name brand shoes or whatever. Have you experienced that? Do you feel that's a thing that maybe even you're facing as an adult, or do you see it happening with your kids still or anything like that?
Yeah, for me, like I grew up in a house that obviously had a lot of people in it, and I remember like my friends would have a certain brand of shoe or things like that. And my family, my parents were like, Alex, while your feet are growing, I'm not spending $100 on shoes. That's just, it's not happening. Your feet are growing like every 6 months. It's silly. And, I would fight that because to me, it wasn't about like the practicality of the item. It was like my identity is there. So I remember being, and you're always trying to find your identity. I remember probably 13, 14, somewhere in there, I was into skateboarding. And I remember there was this pair of shoes, the Costin ones that came out, and like all my friends were getting them, and my parents were like, you're not getting them. It's silly. Those are like $120 pair of shoes, 100, whatever they were. And I remember going behind my parents' back. Like this meant so much to me that I went behind their back. I took my piggy bank money. I went with a friend to, bag and save or whatever, took all my money in there, turned it into cash, and then went with my friend to Bikes, Boards, and Blades, which was the skateboard shop, so I could go buy those shoes because it mattered so much to me. My identity was so wrapped up in like looking the part that I mean, such a bad investment as I look back on it now, but I was so consumed by that in my identity that I remember like I just didn't feel as cool. Like you can't skate in whatever, shoes. They're going to rip, and all those excuses that I created in my mind to be able to need those. Yeah. And I was so consumed by that. And that's just one example. There was, rollerblades, things like that. I'm like, I got to have K2. I've got to have the brand versus this generic. And I'm grateful right now, at least in my life, like my kids don't seem to have a clue. And like, I'm like honestly thankful because it's too much of my upbringing was, and not because of my upbringing, too much of my own self-identity was rooted in that growing up.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is maybe off topic a little bit, but I do think that the brand loyalty thing is going to start to change for the next generation. Just, I mean, a good example of that is Mr. Beast. I mean, if you don't know who he is, he's a YouTuber who has started to develop his own line of, his burger chain called Mr. Beast or Beast Burgers or something like that. And then he's got Feastables, which is like candy bars and things like that. And he's building an empire on a personality. And I think that's where that stuff's going to shift. So our kids are going to be influenced by influencers and want to buy those brands, where they're not even going to be tempted by the brands of their parents and stuff like that. Those are going to be the boomer brands, or something like that. It's not going to be the cool thing. So that's the stuff I see at least my kids being drawn to. They don't really care about the Nikes and Adidas as much. I mean, they like to have a name brand shoe if they can, but they're, they get more caught up into these influencers and what they're pushing.
I also think as we think about growing up, there is also, you notice if you are on brand or you're not. I think like people will point that out too. So it's like even me growing up, I mean, I'm the oldest of 7, so there wasn't like a lot of, I mean, we shopped at Aldi, which now is cool, but back then it was like we didn't get Oreos. I don't even know what a
Chocolate cream-filled wafer
right,
cookies.
Exactly. And so I don't know if I was ever super aware of it until it was pointed out as a kid. And then I felt like, and I think you're right, Alex, where you're saying like it's connected to identity, because you start thinking like, well, what's wrong with me? Or I'm not cool if I don't have this. And then I'm like, wow, we're all kind of kids in a way as adults, because it's like we're still chasing after that. What represents me, or like what shoes am I wearing, or even I think about even going to the gym these days. It's like, what shoe do you have, or what athletic brand are you wearing?
Or even in Hollywood, when that's like the question they ask the women or
who are you wearing tonight?
Who are you wearing? And it's,
oh, you look so beautiful.
They'll name something, some designer. I have no clue what that is or what that means, and it's such a different world.
But I do think that there is something in, I don't know if it's marketing. I think part of it is just us as people being mean, kids being mean. But I think that there's a deficit that's pointed out that we can't look over. It kind of stands in the back of our mind.
It's definitely classism. I mean, it is because there are, you have people who can't afford things, and people who can't afford some things, and people who can afford a lot of things. And it's just, you have to make those choices. And when you're spending money in a family scenario, it's like, you're not always going to get the name brand thing here, but maybe you will. And this, I don't know. It's just, it's capitalism maybe at its worst in some ways, in the way we were affected by that.
I remember Shaquille O'Neal came out with like his own shoe brand to like fight that. Like he saw that, niche, and he's like, I was a kid, I couldn't afford, the popular shoe or whatever. But I think, he's like, I want every kid to be able to have a quality shoe with a name brand on it. That's cool. Like he had created so he used that influence that he had, I think, for positive, and to be able to have, he's like, I want kids to be proud that they can wear, Shaq shoes and all that kind of stuff. And these can be like, he's like, I'm going to have them sold at Walmart, and you cannot go above like $30 or something like that. And so he was intentional about like seeing the negative side of that and trying to do that. And so,
well, and it's again, it sounds like an easy conversation to have, but I do think there's a lot of nuance there, because even then, selling something like Walmart or even the fashion industry that has a lot of cheap clothes, because they sell them with, it's with the intention of them wearing out, so you have to buy more, and then that leads to cheap labor and sending that overseas, people who are making pennies on the dollar. And if you think 100 years ago or longer, people didn't own nearly as much clothing as we do. They just had a few pieces that they swapped in and out, but we have like closets full of stuff. And we're all in some way or another falling victim to this brand loyalty, or at least this idea of having the best or whatever,
right?
And I think, go ahead.
No, it almost feels like even in our conversation, like there's a point where, brand loyalty is not a bad thing. It's not wrong, but there is a pivot point where is this a part of your identity? Is this a part of your self-esteem that it does go to a different place, or it does kind of morph a little bit? And so I don't know.
I mean,
That's
I
where it
think one of the examples I can think of right now is it seems like every year or 2 years there's the popular water bottle, right? And so like,
the Stanley.
yeah, so now it's like the Stanley. And I'm like, where did the Stanley Cup come from? I thought that was a hockey thing. And all of a sudden, like, and it was Yeti right before that. And it was, so there's always like this.
Hydro Flask.
Yeah, Hydro Flat. And then there's tons of generics that make their, their own. And then there's the debate, which works. How long do you need to hold ice? How many people actually need to hold ice for 12 years versus, is it a day and that superior product? And then all of a sudden it's like, I take it around everywhere with me. It's like this kind of flex, that you have of like, I want people to know that I want to be identified as somebody that has this product. And is it actually more superior? You can watch YouTube videos and probably see, if it is or isn't more
so
superior.
That kind of sounds like you're talking about like someone's identity being shaped or created by the brands that they're loyal to. So it's like if I see you carrying a Stanley mug and wearing Hey Dudes, it's like, oh, I mean, it could even be like, hey,
you must be doing well and you like to be comfortable.
Or it's like, hey, do you know Alex? Oh, you don't know who he is? He's the guy wearing the Hey Dude shoes, or he's wearing this shirt. It's like we point people out.
You just made me think of something. I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast before, but I remember it's probably around fourth grade. Growing up, my dad was always pastoring different churches or moving around a lot. We moved to Aberdeen, South Dakota. There was no church building there. There was going to be a home church, and we were going to meet the one like family that was a part of this home church.
Wow, this is an early memory.
And
I love it.
I had it in my head that because I think we stopped at a gas station at some point, and I got a Slim Jim. And I had it in my head that I was going to be like Slim Jim guy. Like in fourth grade, I wanted people to identify me as Slim Jim guy. Like I'm just always snapping into a Slim Jim. Like, and so I had the Slim Jim, and I was like saving it till we got to this family's house because I was really going to impress these kids with me eating a Slim Jim. And it totally backfired in like me feeling bad because I didn't have more Slim Jims to share. Like I was just like, this looked like this jerk eating a Slim Jim. Like I later on we were playing soccer in the yard, and I slipped on mud and got covered in mud. So
so that's what
I got
you were
paid back. But so I became known as like mud guy or something. I don't remember, but kid who slipped in the mud. But yeah, it is that thing of like we try to find those things that make us who we are. Like I think the Starbucks example is one of those. I have like green straw classism where I've got the Starbucks coffee, or I only drink Starbucks because of whatever, or
I hate it.
I don't because
I'm only
they
a
don't,
scooters person.
Yeah, because I'm boycotting them for some reason. They got rid of Christmas, so yeah.
Yeah, and there's definitely those examples, and I do think more than, at least for me, more than I'd like to admit, subconsciously, I'll do that. I will use those things to flex. I will not drink all of the coffee just so I can take it into them. And that's not really one, but like whatever it is, like I'll not do it just so I can.
You won't finish your bang before
just
the meeting.
So people know that I'm not just having.
I'm bang guy.
Yeah, a rain, but I have a bang.
Yeah, I think you're a bang guy.
A quick note,
I'm just imagining Alex with bangs right now.
Producer Austin, quick note, he shot me one, and I think he was making fun of us. Maybe he said AirPods.
Oh yeah,
seem to be one of those. Right now.
But he also made fun of Apple Watches, and Mr. Austin has an Apple Watch over there right now. So AirPods are coming.
But
soon.
To his point, I do think like. I remember like when Beats headphones came out.
Yeah.
Like I would go in the mall and like kids would just have not listening to anything. Like they were just headphones like we're wearing right now.
Yeah.
Over ear headphones, and they would just be draped around like a necklace.
Yeah.
Or like the tag on the hat, for a long time.
Yeah, leave your tag.
There was those kinds of ideas of like, no, I got this new. And there's companies that obviously like StockX Exchange that like going and verifying that can maybe get into the moral argument of knockoffs and things like that. But I think all of us maybe should be honest, at least from the Christian perspective, of where does our identity lie, and how do we start to wrestle honestly and thoroughly, not with other people, but with ourselves, of like, how much is this affecting me?
Yeah, and I think it can go the other way too. Like you could say, oh, well, if I went to Mark Ashton's house, I better only see off-brand everything when I go in there, because
for sure,
he's a leader of a church, and like he should be representing himself in a humble way. He better drive a Datsun from 1980, and like, you know what I mean? Like or because if it's the other, I'm going to be upset that he's, preying off of.
And there's accounts like
faith,
Preachers and Sneakers and things like that have tried to highlight, I think, the exorbitant amounts of money spent on shoes or, belt buckles or whatever that seems like, hey, that doesn't match up with. So yeah, you're right. But it could go the opposite way of like, he should not even be comfortable.
Yeah.
Like he should have sandals on all the time and not even wear socks and walk around like Jesus did it.
Yeah. Yeah. It can just go to both extremes in these conversations.
And both of them can end up, I think minimalism is maybe one of the answers to this problem, and for some people, but there's that opposite of like, you can be so hung up in minimalism and that you're judging anyone that has any kind of consumer bone in their body, but maybe you're not consuming products, that you're wearing, but it's every subscription service or every this or every that. And so it's a different kind of flex for sure. And so that's why I think asking ourselves these tough questions and being honest about how much of that is in our own life.
Well, and I mean, the Bible talks about where you put your money is where your heart is.
Yeah, where your treasure is, your heart will be.
And
so
I think we see that, people, that makes people, it reveals people's heart a lot of where they're willing to spend. I do think
it like even with that example of Mark in Jesus sandals, it's like how, like that's exactly like being in 3rd or 4th grade and somebody expecting you to dress or act a certain way. We're just adults that now I'm looking at you and I'm saying, oh, you have a Graco stroller and I have a Graco stroller and you have a Bob stroller, or it's like, you're drinking Mountain Dew, and
you're going right for the heart with the stroller.
But there's just certain things where it's like that is something that you just did not start. It's something that has been cultivated in us, and we've attached self-esteem and identity to something that we're not taking with us.
Yeah.
And so it's like we need to go back and identify that. And I'm not just saying like on a surface level, but it's like I really want to, after this, I want to examine myself of like, where is my self-esteem and identity rooted? Like what, and like you said, like what do I want to be known for?
And tribalism definitely comes into this, and it happens. It can happen in every space. There's extra spiritual version Bibles, ESV versus the NIV, and like all that kind of stuff that essentially are different products, but
King James only
we can
over here
push it to so much that it's a brand, and those that don't do it, it's another classism kind of separation, that happens. I'm curious, have you guys ever like had a knockoff? Like you wanted something so badly. I went on an 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. and New York City, and like I wanted Oakleys. I wanted so bad to have a pair of Oakleys.
This was the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was never going to afford it. Early 2000s.
Oh, okay.
And so, like, I'm like, oh, heck yeah. Dude walking around with a cardboard box of Oakleys, $10. Yes.
Done.
Like, because...
The big city is great. They got cheap Oakleys.
And I knew, everybody knew they were knockoffs.
Yeah.
But because I wanted that brand so badly to wear it, to like be cool, and it happens.
You wanted to look like a divorcee in a Sebring.
Is that what it is? I don't know.
It's just that I feel like that brand has lost so much of its meaning. But you're right. Back then, it was everything. To have that O on the side of your
Rolexes. I think of so many brands that were easy to knock off, and
my grandma used to go to Mexico. She would bring me back like a knockoff purse that she bought like from someone, like a street vendor.
Yeah, and you wore it because it had
I used
it had
it.
the what was
Yeah.
what's the cool purse?
Louis.
Yeah, the Louis.
It was the Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
Michael Kors.
Yeah.
So like, yeah.
Yeah.
Any knockoffs that you guys, or am I the only one that's ever?
I mean, I don't know. The only thing that I can think of right now, just because that's where my kids are, is like Pokemon cards. They're always talking about whether they're fake or real Pokemon. But I mean, there's just so much of that. Yeah, I've never quite understood just having the label. I mean, I don't know. There's some stuff that I do like clothing wise, but yeah, I can't think of anything. No.
Yeah, I think I had knockoff Jordans.
Did you?
Too.
Oh
man.
Yeah.
It's just, and it probably does hit everybody a little differently. Like, what's that? What are the things we're willing to do to find acceptance, and how much do we really know that we're loved and valued outside of all those things that are on the outside? Like, how much are we relying on and fooled ourselves into thinking that this is how people perceive me and judge me, and that my value is based on the value of the things that I can afford and project. And so whether it's something we're wearing or whatever, I think we all have those probably things that are happening in our lives, and that's part of discipleship, I think.
But I think with so much with capitalism and the way that it works is it's selling people on a feeling more. We've talked about that before, where like Apple, they are not just selling you a product, they're selling you on how you're going to feel if you own this product. And their marketing, the marketing is just so well done. And then I think for the people who can maybe afford to buy into whatever product that might be, you have other people who can't afford that, but they want to be accepted in that group, in that tribe, whatever you want to call it. And then they can't, and they're looking for alternatives. And then there becomes like these culture wars of Xbox versus PlayStation, and Apple versus Windows, and all this sort of stuff. And it doesn't really get anyone anywhere. It's not important. It's a way. It really just sells more of that product and gets people more radicalized to the brand that they think is better.
And on one side, it's a good part of capitalism because competition's good.
Sure.
Because if someone has a monopoly on something, that's not the best. I think that's partly why medicine and the pharmaceutical industry and things like that, they a brand has to, after a certain amount of years, allow the generics to be made, and so on and so forth, that they've already made.
Which and that's such a messy conversation, because even like I think we didn't quite mention it, but even how like Amazon will look for the product that's selling the best on their website, and then they'll like
basics,
either like buy it out or buy out their warehouse, or buy out another warehouse and start making something exactly like it and call it Amazon Basics. And that's just an example of a monopoly, in a lot of ways. But I know I'm okay with it a lot of times. If I see the Amazon Basics version and it's cheaper, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there's so much we don't even have time to get it. So much ethical.
The ethics of it all. Yeah.
I even remember when we have a friend that works at Kimberly-Clark, and I was shocked that when she told me that the Huggies diapers and the Costco brand diapers were made off the same manufacturing line. And so that's even something we haven't talked about is, one brand is making this type of product, but then there's a backdoor product too, where it's like
TVs, you'll see that in TVs a lot, where a lot of the parts of the TV are made by Sony or Samsung, but they're sold to other distributors, and it's all over there. But we get really hung up on the brand. And
there's certainly even in brands, there's class. Like I think of a van or whatever. Like you can get like 6 different versions that continue to be better, and you can get the one that you got to roll down your windows, or you can go crazy and you get the one that remote start on your car, and anything in between there that try to produce some of that. And I think FOMO plays a role in it as well.
It's a lot of like what we're even talking about is people feeling like they're missing out on something.
On an experience too. And I think that, like what you said, Eric, I think the fact that brands do know that they're selling an experience, it's not just I'm missing out on an experience by not having that product, not just the practicality of using the
Well, look how
product.
much fun that person is having with their iPhone, taking pictures of their friends on their vacation. You know what I mean? Like it's that experience that they want to be a part of that they don't have, and they're just playing into that in a lot of ways.
So what are ways that we can not just talk about this being an issue, but if we're wrestling with maybe this is a problem, or how do I navigate, this dilemma in our lives? I know, Jess, I'm sure you've talked to families that maybe you're walking someone through identity issues or whatever. And are there just practical tools that you would talk to a teen or their parents about when maybe their identity is kind of getting out of whack?
Yeah.
In that kind of area?
So one thing that I actually just recently used in a session was just to build consumer literacy. And to me, that would be having conversations during commercials or teaching kids as like a commercial is on, discussing like what TV ads are, what are they selling, what are they saying that it'll do for me, and is it true? It's kind of questioning it, because I think a lot of times it's passive and it's like, why aren't we questioning that? What can we be teaching in when something's on? And I think even like creating a question or a conversation around it, it adds more meat to, okay, well, I just need this, or I want this.
Yeah.
So that for me would be a place to start for sure. An easy place to start.
Yeah, and I think as parents, like we can project those things on, like we can project what we value and our kids see it. Like if my identity, if I'm like, no, I'll never, if my mom gets me a shirt, I'll use that as an example. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not this, or I don't like it because it's not this, or I have to have every brand like this. And I'm not actually maybe explaining, hey, here's the reason behind it, or here's why I prefer, this thing, or if they ask questions. I think it's just being honest, about those kinds of things, and being honest about, the times where like, yeah, and then I just think it's the better, or it makes me feel better to walk around with the Stanley Cup because it has a handle and a straw, and nobody else had that, and so I think it's okay to have those products.
It's kind of morally neutral in a lot of ways.
It is.
Right.
It is morally neutral in a lot of ways, but then at some point it becomes this difficult question for us to wrestle with. Okay, how much is my identity attached to it? Like for example, one of the things I did a couple of years ago, because I like to buy, clothes and, shirts, and, too much of my identity can be wrapped up in the things that I'm wearing. Like I was like, I took it from Josh Becker, like, hey, for 30 days, I'm going to pick like 12 pieces of clothing, not including underwear, everybody. You can wear those twice. You just flip them around. Totally kidding. But I'm just to layer and everything with like those 12 pieces of clothing just to see if I can do it, because
you might want to see the doctor underwear.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. Sorry.
But there becomes this stewardship issue when it's like, okay, you've got 2 pairs, you've got 2 feet. How many pairs of shoes do you need?
Yeah.
How many shirts do you need? How much, and I've admitted that, I think even on here, like I tried to see how long I could go without repeating an outfit, like on the podcast, and that what's healthy about that? It's feeding my own ego, and like somebody's going to notice that and care and call me out on it. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I think so much of it too is just such a hard issue, because you look at like when 9/11 happened, or the peak of COVID and the pandemic, you saw people realizing that the world's out of their control. And I think so much of our comfort and everything, we just take it for granted. We're so rich in this country. Like, no, I mean, we talked about that before, but I just think that when we can buy comfort and we can buy what our identities, and we can pay for that. We can pay for plastic surgery. We can pay for so much that is who we think we are. But then when something tragic happens, and then we start to realize maybe what we actually value, what's really important, whether that's our health or our loved ones. And I mean, I like Matthew 6:24 says, "Come now, you rich people, weep and wail for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches have rotted, and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. And, I mean, Jesus a lot of times doesn't have nice things to say about rich people. And I think, I mean, as gutting as it is and as convicting as it is to me, like, I don't consider myself a rich person, but compared to the rest of the population of the world, I am very rich.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that we need to examine ourselves, and when we're building our identities in brands, or I have this or I have that, and this makes me special, man, we got to be careful.
Yeah, and it's not money, it's not brands that's the root of evil, but it's the love for, and I think that's what Jesus is going after.
I think so much of that identity building is
I
that
agree.
because we love it.
Yeah.
Because we think we're going to be loved because we have built our identity on a brand.
Yeah.
You know?
Identity, and I think identity is connected in this case to self-esteem. And so it's like when we put all of our eggs in one basket where it's like this represents us, I mean, how are you going to feel if somebody says, wow, that's not cool anymore, or whatever? It's like, where does our self-esteem come from? Is that something that we need to look at?
Yeah.
Because I can guarantee for both of you, you'd rather hear me say, man, I really respect you guys because you're great dads and you love your wives. And I don't even have to like hear it every day to know that you love Jesus, more than like, wow, I think you have like a cool pair of pants on. And so it's just like, but maybe you do care. Maybe it does matter. So it's like, why would your brand outweigh those things that you would be known for? And so I do think it's about looking at our self-esteem, like what makes up who we are. Is it, where are we volunteering, or who are we noticing, or how am I living my life? I mean, I think it's just so much more than that, but exactly what you're saying. It's like we get wrapped up in this one thing, like this cup represents who I am, or my bumper sticker, or like I ran 26 point.
Or Jeep people.
Yeah.
They're kind of weird sometimes.
Subaru people are too.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't necessarily like want to dog on people that have all that, but it's just
It's a fine it's a fine balance.
You are more
It
than
is.
that.
Yeah.
Like both of you are more than
Right.
your Nike beanie.
Yeah. It's a super fine balance, because you can, harp on people for loving something out of good reason and research and all that kind of stuff, and ability to get that, and then there is that balance. And I think, to go to your point from that Matthew 6, it's a part of the whole Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is saying, I'm building a different kingdom, and it looks different than the kingdom that you're subscribing to. And he's not like, it's not all bad, but if your treasure is in this kind of stuff, man, you're going to be missing out, because you're going to be a slave to that. That's the things that you're going to want to serve. You can't have two masters, And so I think so much of that as Christians we do have to consider.
I think the scary part is that we read that as a Christian and we don't think it's us.
Yeah.
He says rich person and we think he's talking about someone else.
Yeah.
And that's, we got to take a look in the mirror sometimes. Yeah. All right. Well,
Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoy all your presents.
All your presents. I hope you got all the brand names that you wanted.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Alex. It's not about, if you enjoy that brand, that's fine. It's not a bad thing.
No, I don't think that's what
just
we're
realize
saying.
Treat yourself.
That's not who you are. You don't need that to exist, to be loved, to have your identity, formed. I don't know. It's tough.
I agree.
All right. Any final thoughts? Any closing ideas?
I mean, just a reminder, people are not going to want to miss when we get back, because I think we're going to know at least the gender. We should have a gender reveal.
For
Maybe
Austin's
tune in
baby.
next time for Austin's baby reveal.
Maybe instead of, a pink balloon or a blue balloon or cutting the cake, this podcast could be the gender reveal.
Yeah. All
I'm
his,
sure
all
his
his
wife would
family
love
could
that.
gather around
Listening for
an
the episode.
iPod to listen. And,
This is exciting.
all right. And they'll have to listen to the whole episode. We'll wait to reveal it at the end.
You can't scrub through.
They'll love it. Okay.
He looks so happy right now.
Poor Austin. All right.
He's
And
watching the World Cup,
as
I
a
think.
reminder, we are taking a little break for the holiday, and we'll be back in mid-January. So, keep your podcast feeds refreshed.
Leave us some voicemails, though. It'd be
Yeah,
fun.
Please
let's
do.
build up a library of voicemails.
That'd
That'd
be
be
awesome.
great. What's that number? I got it right here. I'll tell you what it is. 402-885-9930. 402-885-9930. I always like saying a phone number on here. It makes me feel like a radio
Sound
host
like
or
a
something.
DJ.
But yeah, you can call and leave a voicemail. You can reach out to us on social media on Instagram and TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can shoot us an email at podcast@cccomaha.org. We would love to hear from you. We always appreciate the feedback. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and all of those things.
See you next year.
And we'll see you next year.